Hey everybody, Mike Shope, Adam Krautwurst. This is the Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast powered by Draft Sharks. Adam and I were just in Las Vegas for the main event drafts and certain other hijinks. We'll talk about that tonight. The show has been going for about a year. The deal was Adam has been a high-stakes player and said, let's talk about life in the high-stakes waters. But guess who is in the deep end now? I think the line here, I don't know whether to thank you or blame you.
Yes. The answer is yeah. Well, the answer is how well you do this year, right? You might, right. You might hit. No, you're gonna do fine. Listen, it's all about the experience. It's all about the ride, Mike. It's all about going to Vegas, right?
It's a lot about the ride. In all honesty, how I do this year will mean a lot toward next year. Because, I would never have imagined a year ago starting this show with you that I would be playing in the main event and sitting here with four teams. Like, oh, yeah. What happened? So, I have one team of my own, and then I split three. Two with Louis G and another with a friend, Mark. I do think it went really well for me. But it's funny. I've always said everybody always loves their drafts. These conversations with you on this show have helped me really, and I can't overstate this, appreciate the strategy in builds, and when you go to Vegas, you meet guys like Andrew Geller and Biplop and guys they just do this a lot all the time. And it's a serious thing, how you build your team. You end up, as we've talked about a lot, Adam, like building by positions and tiers more so than players. And you sort of almost necessarily end up with different players. Anyway, I've learned a lot. We're going to see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I had a great time in Vegas. I did my first 3K. Thought that team went really, really well. I think I finished fourth in scoring this week, which it wasn't terrible. Did my first auction out there, 750 auction. That was interesting. I kind of didn't have laptop access. I thought my laptop charged all night. I get there, I open up my laptop, it's dead. So I'm going bare knuckle auction for the first half an hour while it charges. So that was fun. And then I did two main events. I watched you. I kind of rubbed your shoulders during your bare knuckle. Watched you do that, and that was an absolute blast.
But you never tapped in. You didn't want a part of that seat.
Listen, one of my strengths is that I know my weaknesses, and just seeing all the hard work you were putting in, and talking to the drafters afterwards, all the hard work they put in. I think Biplap Mandel was sitting next to you in the 12 spot. Yeah. He was telling me how he printed off a blank draft and just wrote a draft in from start to finish. I'm like, that sounds excruciating. So I'm glad I didn't try to tap in and do my worst impression of that.
Well, I was confident with how I would do, just in terms of remembering players by position. I think I talked to Biplop during the draft. What your process is interesting, by teams or by position, whatever you might do. So I was not worried about remembering players. This was after the Dallas-Tampa Bay game, by the way, which came after my WGR show, which we did from Naked City Pizza in Vegas, owned by a Buffalo guy. It's like a Bills backers bar. We scrambled to get on the air there. And before that was a main event. So this was a seriously long, fun, but arduous day of football and fantasy football. By that night, I was glad I hadn't been drinking because it was hard. And I, as confident as I was, and as it's true as it is, I think that I didn't make any real gaffes or anything, like no obvious mistakes. Neither did anyone else. It's $750. You might expect people to take it seriously, and they did. There were no soft spots, I think, in the room, no crazy desperation. Justin Tucker in the 6th round or something like that, I thought might happen.
Benny Agbayani.
Yeah, there were no sort of moments like that. Nobody timed out once. 28 rounds times 12, 30-second clock, no notes. That's the point. You can't. Not only can you not take any notes in, but you can't write anything down. And one point on that. So you draw playing cards for draft order, and I drew 4. And the people who drafted or picked 1, 2, 3 all chose 1, 2, 3. And then I chose 11. And my thinking was I wanted 2 things. I wanted time to sort of think through the board as picks were being made and to be organized. I'd never done this, and I wanted to be able to do that. The other is I wanted one person behind me so that, like, if he had drafted quarterbacks, I can afford to wait, tight ends, whatever. And in retrospect, I would have done that differently, because what was really hard that night, especially as it got later and you're drafting the 25th kicker and whatnot, is remembering the players that you thought of between your pick at the second pick of the round all the way back 20 picks later.
Yeah.
Because I was doing this in front of me, no pen or paper, just pretending, like, sort of sorting with my hands, Marlon Mack, Matt Breida, like, just everybody.
Yeah.
And as the middle rounds are going by, really rounds 6 through 10, I think I got into some trouble because I felt like I was struggling to make optimal choices. Week 1 did not go well for me in that. I started Najee Harris, Saquon Barkley at 11 and 14, and they both had terrible fantasy weeks. So we're last, but I don't hate my team really. I was really proud to do it. I think we'll hang in there. I don't think we'll win. I never thought we'd win coming out of it.
Yeah, it's a long because I can't remember what team I love. I think you did fine. I think I really like Team 9. I think maybe, but I don't remember who they took. But yeah, no, it was a good job by everybody for sure.
And I bet it was cool to watch and sort of like I would have liked that, sort of thinking through.
Yes.
Who would I pick right here in 30 seconds?
Right.
It was a tremendous challenge. And it's a format I'll want to do every year, whether it's out there or with friends. I mean, it's a best ball league. There's nothing more to do.
Yeah.
Now, the main event is the signature event of the FFPC. And those drafts went Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right? Even Saturday?
Saturday, yes. Yep. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There were some drafts Sunday morning. I'm not sure if they were – I don't think they were main events, though. I think they were just online – standard leagues.
And the Thursday night game is played, but if you're in, as anybody knows, probably everybody watching knows because they might be involved in some FFPC format, maybe not, but you can move the players in and out from the Dallas Tampa Bay game. I happened to run up against 2 teams, both that drafted after that game, I think. Well, one did, but I ran up the guy after us in the Friday night main event drafted Brady and Gronkowski. So he was tough to beat.
Yeah.
But it was cool to see those moves. Amari Cooper went round 2 in the bare knuckle. Antonio Brown went round 3. And that's right after the game. So anyway, it was a great time. It was a tremendous week. FFPC does a great job, very friendly and sharp.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to meet all those people that you were kind of in podcast with. It was nice to meet Guilds and hang out with him a little bit and everyone.
Yes.
And all those guys. So
my main event Friday night, Guilds was in it. Jay and Scott was in it. Biplop was in it. Yep. So if you're going out there, you want to take on all of it, right? Like
right.
You don't want to miss a shift.
That's right.
Well, thank you again to those people in Las Vegas. We had a great time. If we ever decide we get bored with fantasy football, this will become a blackjack show because I just cannot with Adam. I just cannot. You just have to stop with the
line. The line of the week in Vegas. I was telling Sam on the way home was when me yelling instincts at the blackjack table, and you looking at me going, "How did our paths ever cross?"
I'll say it. Adam's the guy at the blackjack table who gives the speech about how if you have a 5 against a 10, or if you have 15 against a 10, listen, Mike, if you don't take a card, you have a chance.
Is it wrong? Listen, but then I'm looking down the table and I see nothing but low cards. The next one's a 10. It's coming. I pass. You hit because you have to. 10.
That's right.
Instincts. Right. Okay.
Instincts is the best. All right. So let's get into week 2.
Let's do it.
We might have some people watching tonight who want to know what to do, whether it's, an obvious team comes to mind. You always have, right, Adam? This is really where you're quite experienced. You've got that week one player or players who were on nobody's radar until the season started, and there it is. Elijah Mitchell is the obvious name here. The first 100-yard rusher in history since the merger to be drafted from the 4th round on in his first game, week one of his rookie year.
I did not know
that. Because it's San Francisco, you don't know whether to trust it. So starting with Mitchell, if you want, Adam, like, how do you approach this week?
Yeah. So, there's been a lot, everyone's right glued to the Elijah Mitchell information for a couple of reasons. One, he had a big game, looked pretty good. And then also, you have Raheem Mostert out for the year. And I keep hearing, we're all trying to take in every podcast, every piece of information we can find, every piece of advice. What do I do? And I've always said this, the reason why I love high stakes is because it's really great, because it makes you, like, you have to think and react super, super quickly, right? So, like, this information comes out by Wednesday evening, you have to plant your flag on a guy like Elijah Mitchell. So you get someplace to tell you, if you really want him, go and bid, 20% if you really want him. And I'm thinking to myself, man, you're never going to get him for 20%. Okay. You're just not. So if you really want Elijah Mitchell, you're going to have to bid more. You're going to have to bid at least 50%. And that was before we found out that Mostert was done for the year. I'm thinking to get Mitchell, you're going to need to bid 70% or higher to get him. Now, I'm not going to tell people they should go out and get them. It really depends on the roster build, right? So if you went 0 RB, or if you went, 1 RB at the beginning and then went heavy tight end and receiver, this is what you've kind of been waiting for. And I hate to say, waiting for is probably the wrong word because we're in week one, but these opportunities is what kind of 0 RB is built on. It's built on dominating the flex, dominating receiver, dominating tight end, maybe having an elite quarterback in there. Hopefully you waited into Jalen Hurts, and then pouncing on these running back injuries. So there's some leagues where, I did go heavy receiver and I'm going to bid a ton. I'm not going to tell people exactly what I'm bidding because we're all, competing with one another, but I'm going to bid a ton on Elijah Mitchell where I think I need him. There's leagues where I have Raheem Mostert. I think one league, I'm probably going to bid a ton on Elijah Mitchell. If you went heavy running back, I would not bid a ton on Elijah Mitchell because there are question marks. There are questions about, is Trey Sermon really dust there? Is Trey Sermon, going to come back in and have a role? Are they going to split 50-50? Are they going to pick up somebody else? I think they picked up Kerryon Johnson in the last couple hours. So I don't know. I think if I had to give someone advice and you needed a running back, I would say go get Elijah Mitchell. But if you want Elijah Mitchell, you got to be ready to pay 70% for him because he's not going for anything less than 50% anywhere. I don't think.
I think, without so much experience at this, I think maybe most people's instinct would be that they'd be a little bit afraid to do that because there's so much uncertainty in the backfield. And wouldn't this be your instinct? Like, there's 16 more weeks and I'm probably going to need that money. So what's your answer to that? Like, how often when you make a move like this, do you end up feeling like you missed the money?
It's scary. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, well, again, when you're paying all this money to be in these leagues and right out of the gate, before we even get to watch anything, we had to see 1 week of football. Now you have to make a decision for your fantasy life, right? Like, I have to decide right now, like, am I going to make this season long bet, plus 600, plus 700. I guarantee you there'll be $900 plus bids on him. Am I going to stake my season on Elijah Mitchell? But I think you're more planting your flag on the Niners running game is what I think you're doing. And I think, and then, I always have this, we'll talk about this more as the season goes on, but this whole start sit mentality. Like, if I start this player and he goes off, am I going to be able to sleep at night knowing that what decision is going to help me sleep better at night? When you put in your waiver wire bids for Elijah Mitchell, right? Is it going to be one of those things where you're going to be jumping on at 3 a.m., you're going to be hopping on the website to see if you got him? Are you going to be really disappointed if you didn't get him? Then you need to bid more. You need to go get him. If you don't really care, if you're like, I don't really need to have him, then don't bid as much. But I think, it's your team, it's your gut feeling. But I'm just telling you, in order to get him, you're going to have to bid high, and it's going to affect your season. If Elijah Mitchell bombs from here on out, which is possible, it's going to affect your season if you bid $800 and get him. But if you went 0 RB or 1 running back early and he ends up being an RB2 the rest of the way, would you trade $750 worth of FAAB budget for RB2 the rest of the way if you went 0 RB?
Probably. In Mitchell's case, though, the real challenge is San Francisco, which it's maybe a little bit counterintuitive. I mean, they're so good. That's part of the problem is you would just assume almost anybody they turn to will do well. And that frees up that coach to do things like he did Sunday, which is to bench Trey Sermon because, he's playing a team that he's favored against. He's confident in his team and his schemes. And so he can mess around. He can make a point about professionalism with Sermon or Ayuk. And how did he do? He scored 41 points. So my feeling but I feel like there's probably a little bit of being a little bit too careful here on some level. I wouldn't expect to be able to predict when to start Elijah Mitchell. Mostert being out is relevant, obviously. Kerryon Johnson may end up being relevant. Who's to say with those guys? Jermichael Hasty. You had the game last year. They played at Foxborough. And I think everybody started, maybe it was Jerick McKinnon that game, and Jeffrey Wilson scored 3 touchdowns. He'll be back.
Yes.
Just to fool around, which I don't really mean to say is what they're doing, but it sort of works like that. They could sign anybody. They could sign the Ravens cut Trenton Cannon. San Francisco signs Trenton Cannon. What if he went for 80 yards this week? Almost nothing is crazy or ludicrous with the Niners. I wouldn't trust myself to know when to start Mitchell. And that sort of, you talk about sleeping well. If that really is part of the equation, knowing who to start on San Francisco would make me crazy. Because I think it's likely that they'll mess around. I mean, Sermon was a high enough draft pick, I would think, and a good enough prospect, I would think that they'd want to, have him be a part of this at some point. But when?
Yeah. And Jermichael Hasty and Jeffrey Wilson are available everywhere too. I would put in, no, you're not putting anywhere near the size of the bid for Jermichael Hasty or Wilson, but I'm putting in bids for all of them. I want pieces. I want all the pieces, right? So, or, I want a piece on the San Francisco running game. So I'm absolutely going to put in, secondary bids for those guys if I do lose out on Elijah Mitchell or something like that. But I do agree with what you're saying, and that's why it's scary, because it's not just a regular old handcuff situation. Like if Tony Pollard was, let's say Tony Pollard was available everywhere and Zeke goes down, you're not getting one of those situations where he's going to go for a ton of FAAB budget. So Pollard would go for everything, so it's going to be interesting. It's going to be scary. But I think, like I said, Mike, on teams where you went 0 RB, you are going to be starting him. You know what I mean? You're going to have that RB1 or RB2 spot that you're going to be starting him on.
Can I share a main event board of mine and give you an example real quick?
Absolutely.
So let me see if I know how to do this. Here. Can you see that?
I don't see it yet being shared. I think you have to click share.
I got it.
Perfect.
Share.
There we go. Whoa.
There
we go.
I know, right? Can you see that?
I can. Yep.
So Luigi and I are team 2.
Okay.
In this draft.
Yep.
Actually, no. This is a team I drafted by myself. This is not a team I share with Louis. Not that it has to matter, but I'm team 2 here. Running backs: Kamara, Sermon, AJ Dillon, Bernard, Mack.
Yes. So there's so many angles to this. This is why this is so much fun. If I have Trey Sermon on a team, I'm not going all out for Elijah Mitchell, because I'm on that team. I'm still planning on Sermon being a thing, or I'm betting on Sermon being a thing. I would not double down bid everything to have both of them, I would just know that I've already made the bet. And I tweeted this earlier. This reminds me of the situation last year with Jonathan Taylor, right? You just needed an injury to Marlon Mack, right, to have Jonathan Taylor be a stud. Mack gets hurt week 1, super exciting. Jonathan Taylor's going to explode, and Shanahan took that for me this year with the Trey Sermon not being started or not even being active. So, but I still have hope that Sermon. Maybe you're right, Mike. Maybe he wasn't professional and he needed to be punished for something that we don't know about. And then he comes in and he's awesome for the rest of the year. So if I have a Sermon team, I'm betting on Sermon being the guy.
Right.
And in fact, if I were you, I'd be super excited. In fact, if I were you, maybe I go get Hasty for cheap so that I've got 2 of the 3 pieces and I'm not spending $800 or something. Go get Jeffrey Wilson, something like that, where you've got more pieces to this backfield now. But that's what I would do. But if, let's say, Sermon was a different running back on your team, I would probably still avoid it, because when I say 0 RB or 1 RB, I'm talking about like if you went Kamara and then didn't go a running back until AJ Dillon. That's when if Sermon didn't exist on that team, that's when I would go heavy on a guy like Elijah Mitchell.
If this week Sermon is active, they have the Eagles, right?
I don't even know.
Well, let me ask this question also about Brandon Ayuk. Week 2 rolls around and Sermon is active. I mean, Mostert is out, so somebody else is going to be active there. Why wouldn't it be Trey Sermon? If it's not Trey Sermon this week, there's something serious. So Sermon is active. Ayuk is active. I mean, they're talking about his injury. He was on the field on punts in this game. He played couple dozen snaps or so. So he wasn't that badly hurt.
Right.
How do you decide when to start him?
Yeah, I heard. That's why I just want to encourage people to listen to all of the information you could possibly get your ears on. Read everything you can read, because when football's going on Sundays, we're all trying to enjoy it. We're all trying to watch and learn. But I don't know that Brandon Ayuk's returning punts. I didn't even know that Brandon Ayuk returned punts until I listened to a podcast today. I think it was John Daigle. John Daigle said that he was returning punts. Wait a minute. If the guy's returning punts, then it's not a hamstring issue. They wouldn't have him back there. So it's he's not ready or he's not professional or whatever. And I don't mean not ready physically. I mean not ready mentally, which I just find so odd. But with Ayuk, I'm not starting him this week. I mean, how can you? And I also have a lot of teams where I went heavy receiver where I don't need to. So, but it stinks. I mean, it's great for those Debo guys. If you bet on Debo over Ayuk, man, you are loving life right now. But I don't think you can start Ayuk until, they throw him the ball.
Right. Not to move away from week 2, a couple other names are interesting. Mark Ingram is one. When it came down to it with Houston, anybody brave enough to pick any of them seemed to start with Phillip Lindsay and then maybe bring in David Johnson. I know in the bare knuckle draft, the guy in the end, this was probably not the only time it happened, picked Lindsay and Johnson together. But here's Ingram approaching 30 carries in the first game. Johnson and Lindsay did also score. Just a crazy effort by Houston. Ingram is probably their number 1 running back, though. How much is that worth?
Oh gosh. I mean, Jacksonville's apparently a disaster, right? So the good news is here's how I would look at it. If I own Lindsay or Johnson, I'm actually excited because there is 0.0% chance that Mark Ingram survives 20, 30 carries a week. He's going to get hurt. So if they want to pound him into the line of scrimmage like that, it might be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, might be 5 weeks. He's never going to make it. And then you've got a 2-headed attack, which is what you want. So, and Lindsay, like you said, Lindsay scored. David Johnson was the receiving back there. So I think if you have a chance to pick up Lindsay, someone's going to drop. No, they're not going to drop Lindsay because he scored, but Lindsay might get dropped in the next week or so. Scoop him up, because when Ingram gets hurt, Lindsay's going to be that bell kind of running back, the bell cow back, the guy, the one that gets the handoffs. And then he can be a nice kind of flex option for you.
Well, these running backs, and there may be others, are interesting. And you were, I think, right to point out they're interesting players or pickups specifically for teams that avoided running back heavy drafts. And it felt like, it became very trendy to do that, and a lot of people were doing that. So there might be a year where you need even a bigger bid on some of these running backs to get home. Wide receiver wise, I think there were some interesting ones. Let's start with yours, and then I'll bring up a couple of mine. You like Cedric Wilson a little bit with the Gallup injury in Dallas.
I love Cedric Wilson. And in fact, I think the coach said today they're going to slide Cedric Wilson right in, and it's going to be like nothing changes. I think it was Kellen Moore said that. I like the confidence from Kellen Moore. He's not Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup's really good. He's probably the best number 3 receiver in football. So he's not that, but he came right in, caught a couple passes, knows the offense. He's like a gadget guy there. And with kind of the whole Jeudy thing is, so Judy's out 4 to 6 weeks. I would bet my money that you're not going to feel comfortable starting him for 8 weeks. I mean, these guys come back from these injuries. We're going to get a report in the next 2 weeks where Judy's feeling really great, right? Like, oh man, he's going to be back in 4 weeks and feel great. Even if he comes back in 4 weeks, these guys, the high ankle sprain kills them for longer than that. So I wouldn't feel comfortable starting him for about 8 weeks. And Cedric Wilson's a guy that if he can get you 5 of those 8 weeks and slide in there, I think he's a nice flex spot. There might be some better options as far as straight up fantasy points, like maybe like a KJ Hamler might do it. A Tim Patrick might do a little bit better. Maybe Zach Pascal, Deontay Harris. Those guys might score more fantasy points, but I think they're going to go for way more bid dollars than a guy like Cedric Wilson would go for. So I like a nice cheap Cedric Wilson bid because the game was on Thursday. People might have forgot about it a little bit. I like maybe sliding him in there under the radar because I think he's going to do really well.
I think a lot of those players, myself, I would say I would include Wilson in this. I just don't expect there to be enough volume to make it worth it. And that's reflected in target share, but also snap counts and these things. Who did you mention? You mentioned Wilson, but who else were we just talking about? I'm thinking about a name I want to use as a counterpoint.
Tim Patrick,
Pascal.
Pascal, yeah.
Pascal is an example of that for me. I just think it's a no. But
what about Hunter Renfrow?
Oof. So many different Zay Jones, but Ruggs and Edwards. Edwards had nothing until the end of the fourth quarter. Like,
right?
Who knows? Who knows? A very strange game last night. I do think Patrick is interesting. They're in Denver. They have had some success with him before.
Yeah.
And so I feel like he caught a touchdown pass this week as well. I think he's somebody that might work out. Very interesting first week for Denver. Yes, probably a bad opponent, but they got it working with different guys, especially Noah Fant. I feel like Noah Fant is a player that for anybody that drafted a lot of him, he might be somebody where the ratio of his drafters are like the happiest versus other NFL players. Fant got volume in that game, and with Jeudy out, that looks like it has a lot of potential. I also think KJ Osborne is interesting in Minnesota because he was clearly their third pass target. No Irv Smith, and the tight end thing is kind of murky. So Osborne, who played at University of Buffalo and then transferred to Miami of Ohio, which I assume he did on purpose. Has anybody ever transferred from UB to Miami of Ohio? But it's worked out for him, and he's a little bit good. So, I mean, I don't know about the volume there with the Vikings. It's so typical. Like, they had a fairly high pass volume game for them. They lost, and their coach is talking about how they don't really want to be like that. So of course. Wide receiver depth, I think it can be an area where maybe running back is the same, but there can be a real overreaction to some of these receivers based on whether they got in the end zone and just what happened in week one. And so I, for the most part, like it if I drafted deep wide receiver teams, because I don't want to have to guess at that either, right. So
yeah, and I get it too. Like, trust me, I'm going through all my lineups, and the lineups, when I click on a lineup and I see like Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, whatever, Miles Sanders, like it gives you a comfortable feeling. Okay, I've got 3 guys I can rely on, and it looks comfy and whatever, but But I'll tell you, the teams that scored the most points, now that might not be a great example because those three guys did really well. But there's teams that started like Saquon and Zeke and Montgomery, right? Those teams, the teams that started with receivers earlier scored the most points. So I know it's not comfy and I know it doesn't feel good, whatever, when you're looking at it, but that's why these waiver wire decisions, these FAAB budget decisions are so important, and it comes at you so quickly that you really got to plant your flag on this stuff. Receivers, like you said, you don't want to kind of ignore those either, but there's every week, I feel like there's so many. I mean, this week it's Tim Patrick, Christian Kirk, KJ Hamler, there's just, the list goes on and Cedric Wilson, Zach Pascal. There's guys you can throw into your number 2 flex spot if you needed to, and they can perform for you. Running backs, man, you got to find those guys off the waiver, and there's only going to be one a week that's probably worth adding.
Kirk is interesting. Some of the same concerns with the numbers, but 2 scores, experience in the offense. If Green is kind of done, then I think Kirk is somebody, because they were way ahead in that game too. Like they didn't really need to force it, and they got so far up on Tennessee. So I do like that idea. I drafted a few shares of Christian Kirk, which I'm happy about. We mentioned Jerry Jeudy along the way here, Adam, and that's a tough one. I mean, it looked bad. It looked maybe like the season at first. Then they come out with 4 to 6 weeks on Jeudy. Are there circumstances where you would drop him, or is that crazy at this early stage?
I would not drop him. I mean, yeah, no, I can't think of not right now. There wouldn't be a circumstance like, unless I lost, unless half my team got hurt. But no, I think it's, and it's only week 1. That's the good news. He's going to be back, even if it's 10 weeks. He's going to be back with plenty of time for your fantasy playoffs. So I think we and I have some Jerry Jeudy. We kind of got lucky that it happened week 1 and it wasn't a season-ending injury. I know it's the daunted high ankle, but I think with this full season to get back and get right, I'm certainly holding, maybe in like a home league or something, but we're not here to talk about those. But what do you think, Mike? You got a situation where you would consider dropping Jeudy?
Well, probably not. I mean, it doesn't feel right to do it, and yeah, it is early. I think you can, right or wrong, you can get to a point where maybe if it's week 5, and you're talking earlier like it's maybe week 9 before you would play him, or even maybe before Denver would play him, and then you're 10, 11. I mean, by those weeks around the end of October, most of these teams in the main event will need wins.
Yes.
So it will a couple more injuries by then. And so if you sort of, I don't know what the math actually looks like, but if you sort of look forward to the point where, hey, in 6 weeks, he's not on the field yet, and what else am I going to be able to do? Like, do I have enough cuts here? It feels like that's the logic behind cutting him early and just being done with it. But you also want to have that player available that you want to invest in. It doesn't have to be a receiver. I don't know. I don't think I would do it, but I thought it was worth talking about. There is one team we have together where Jerry Jeudy is on that team, and I'm about to show you, but it's going to take a second here because I don't really know what I'm doing. There it is, if you can see it.
It's probably Pros versus Joes, isn't it?
Yes, you have it?
No. I mean, I can find it for sure.
No, I'm sharing it right now.
Okay, I don't see it.
Oh, I missed the same step as last time.
Oh, so
look
gross.
at this! Look at this little team.
Look at that little squad.
So pick 1, McCaffrey, RB1, even without scoring. Amazing. Aaron Jones, Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones. Yuck.
I know. Cooper Kupp, though, obviously, to save the day. Higbee, you want to talk about Higbee for a second? 100% of snaps. Let's go. Yeah, Jeudy. Well, good thing we have 1 million receivers. Mike Williams will fill in for Jeudy for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Okay.
Mike Williams had a very promising week 1.
Jalen Reagor. Oh yeah. Van Jefferson. Oh my God! When you're hot, you're hot. You know what I mean? But
Well, yes.
how'd that team do this week? Do we know?
Middle of the pack.
Okay.
We're like in the overall, we're around 30th out of 72, maybe.
Yeah, that's Aaron Jones, Ridley, and Ridley had like 4 catches on the opening drive too. That was insane.
3 for 39 right away, then zip.
What
happened there?
Gross.
But we were watching the Sunday night game together, like texting through it, and there's Stafford, the Van Jefferson play. Like all these teams we want some running back depth. When we did this draft, the comments were all, you guys, you had it. So Pollard, Madison, Stevenson is the extent of it. And it'd be nice if Aaron Jones bounced back. He probably does.
Yeah, I would hope.
All right. Let's look around a little bit. A few interesting storylines from week 1.
Yep.
Cincinnati. So we mentioned quickly the Minnesota-Cincinnati game. I just think it's amazing that they threw 27 passes in 5 quarters or 70 minutes with the weapons they have. And Chase got in, and Higgins got in. Wasn't much for Boyd. It was really Joe Mixon, 29 carries. So do you see the Bengals, they didn't have the high implied point total through the season, which was a storyline and gave you some caution on Cincinnati. It's 24 points through regulation. It seemed maybe the ball game for the Bengals was keep Joe Burrow upright. And so more running plays, and they were able to stay in the game and eventually win it. It's still an interesting question what kind of volume there will be for all those receivers because they're all good.
Yeah, I think they're going to play in games where they give up more points. I mean, they only gave up 24 points through regulation too. So I think there's going to be games where they give up way more points than that. They're going to be behind. They're going to have to throw. Now, I hate to say it, but I've got more Mixon in the main event than I should because I got him in the 3rd round in one of the, I passed on in the 2nd because I didn't want him. And he falls back to me in the 3rd. I'm like, fine, Mixon.
That is a Draft Sharks logo behind you, right?
I know. Listen,
I can't see so good.
And they're gonna.
You're on brand.
They might pull the plug in the middle of this podcast.
On brand. They love Mixon.
And I get it. Listen, I get it. He's talented, talent plus opportunity. He's going to get the opportunity. And if that keeps up, I mean, he's got top 5 potential. But I think they're going. With that being said, I think they're going to throw more. They have to. I mean, nobody wins these days throwing 25 times through 5 quarters. So I'm not worried about volume. Boyd isn't a guy that I have a lot of. I loved him when he was their number 1/1A, 1B the last 2 years. But this year I don't have a ton of him because I think he's their clear 3. But again, with more volume will come more targets for him. I'm not worried about their volume.
We'll see if they want to throw short often enough.
Sure.
To make Boyd work. The Chase play is just kind of a deep fade. And boom, that's a 50-yard touchdown there. Higgins was short. I don't know. I was impressed that they won and how they did it, that worked. But they're still tough in that division. If Chicago, They have Chicago this week, by the way, the Bengals, Andy Dalton reunion. Jalen Hurts. What a first week for that guy. Maybe nobody did better. I mean, just all the questions about him and their pass offense. It couldn't have gone more excellently for Philadelphia and Hurts.
Yeah, and this is why we told people all the guests we had told people hey, listen, wait on a quarterback and take a running quarterback. The year I came in 5th in the main event, I took Lamar Jackson in the 11th round. You can get these running quarterbacks in the double-digit rounds. Those are the guys that win the leagues in these tournaments, right? Whenever I'm doing tournaments, that's what I'm looking to do. See Jalen Hurts. I think he was quarterback 6 or 7 on the week. Excellent. You probably drafted him as QB 9 or 10 or 11 with that huge weekly ceiling. And if you weren't going to draft a quarterback that ran, you were going to wait longer and you were going to take Stafford, right? Who just, has all the weapons and has all the coaching that he's ever needed. So, Hurts looked great. And it's super exciting for all the Hurts owners out there. and you can now cut that number 2 quarterback that you have, right? So, people who drafted Hurts and then drafted another guy just in case, you can cut that other guy. Use him to pick up, your big high price free agents this week because this quarterback isn't going anywhere. You can worry about the bye week later.
Great first week for the Eagles. They win easily in Atlanta. And again, I think it's the Niners this week. One more, Tampa Bay. So we were all together in Las Vegas watching Bucks Cowboys. It's just so much fun to do that. So many interesting fantasy players on the field for both teams. Leonard Fournette, he got his catches in this game. I'm not sure if he got a touchdown in this game. Maybe?
No, he didn't, because I had a prop bet that he would, and he didn't.
Oh, right. That's right. I remember that now. You're walking around that ballroom with like Leonard Fournette. I'm walking around that same ballroom going, Ryan Santoso, Carolina's kicker.
Ryan Santoso.
For the bare knuckle. Ryan Santoso, who I got sniped on Ryan Santoso, by the way.
Unbelievable.
That's what kind of trip it was. Really, that's what kind of trip it was. It was getting sniped on Ryan Santoso. No, it was a great time. Ronald Jones, so this reminds me of our 49ers conversation. Bruce Arians today. He's like, oh, he's fine. He'll start. Come on. Like, there are more and more of these teams. The Jets, there are more and more of these teams where you just have no idea what to trust at running back, and they really don't have to tell you. So here we are again with the Bucks, and Bernard was not much of a factor in that game. Just late when they were on that last drive, did he get a couple of passes? What do you think they do?
Man, I think they do. I feel like I just saved this little banner from last year. I feel like we had this conversation every other week last year. It's going to be the same thing again. It's going to be like he might start. What does that mean? It means he gets the first carry of the game. Like,
yeah.
If you have,
it also doesn't mean he does start.
Correct.
It just means he might start. So
that is true. The good news is, like, Fournette and Rojo were going in the 9th, 10th, 11th, maybe the 8th round. If you went 0 RB, if you went one stud RB and then waited, you have, kind of a decision to make, but you probably took 4 or 5 of these other running backs in the same range, right? All that to say is I'm not letting his comments about Rojo don't scare me off. If I was going to start Fournette as my RB2 in a 0 RB build or something like that, I'm still going to do it. It's not going to scare me off. I think Fournette, he has a better chance to get in there and passing down work. He has a better chance to get in there at the goal line. Rojo could miss a block. Rojo's going to get benched by missing a block, dropping a pass, or fumbling. Yeah. So, like, one of those is going to happen in the first half of the game, So I'm fine with Fournette. I still have Fournette higher, and I just don't care about what Arians says.
I mean, I think it will be a roller coaster. I think that's maybe the consensus. But they're the Super Bowl champs. They look great. They'll be back in the playoffs. Even that one added playoff team per conference can work into the equation of strategy and the extra game too. Like, we're going to try this week, the way baseball teams and hockey teams with goalies, baseball teams, you're going to rest today. I feel like that's the future in the NFL. There'll be weeks where your running back doesn't play. He'll play next week. But they have no reason yet. There's no pressure on them to tell you that. So it's always kind of been part of fantasy football to have to be sort of ready for this sort of movement. And I think it gets worse because the added schedule, the added playoff team, a team like the Buccaneers, there's absolutely no force behind the Bucs. There's no reason for Bruce Arians, now that he's won, especially, to play anybody else's game at running back. Keyshawn Vaughn could be active this week. He was inactive, and he's still somebody that Arians sometimes talks up. Really, really tough. So one more challenge in that sort of hero running back kind of roster, because these teams in the middle, it's really hard to know what they're going to do. You have to guess right sometimes.
Yeah.
Well,
yep.
So what is that? 45 minutes of talking like that. Good luck, everybody. Good luck.
Right, sorry, guys. Yeah, that's right.
Good luck with San Francisco. Good luck with Tampa Bay. Good luck with Denver. Good luck with all these teams. We just got a message on here from CatJet. Jamie Eisenberg reported a possible curfew violation for Ayuk and Sermon, which would make sense. This is all, I'll do some research after.
This would make sense and be absolutely sensational for Trey Sermon owners because I was in discussion with Jay Moyer on Twitter last night, asking him what the heck is going on with our guy Sermon, and he's still sold on him. So if that's a thing, that's good for Trey Sermon owners for sure.
Yeah, I saw that on Sunday. That was one part of the speculation. Well, Jay Moyer loves him as a runner, right?
Yep.
And Michael Carter too. And Michael Carter isn't seemingly anywhere near playable status with the Jets. But
correct.
I defer to Jay when it comes to their talent and their ability. And he's somebody I think about with respect to Javonte Williams because he has had good, logical, believable, credible breakdowns on Williams. Like it might not be there. The ability just might not be there. And the consensus in fantasy has been, well, they're gonna make that happen. Like they're gonna force that in. And you have a split in week 1 and a 70-yard Melvin Gordon run. So they're tough too.
And to talk about that is, the more you play fantasy, the more you learn. And I encourage people take notes on stuff because you're going to forget that next year. And Dwayne McFarland did a great piece on the whole Denver running back situation in the offseason and just talking about like how running backs that have to deal with other running backs like Melvin Gordon, they just don't hit at their price tag because guys like Melvin Gordon are too good. Unless Melvin Gordon gets hurt, he's just not going to allow Javonte Williams to be what you want him to be in the 5th round. You know what I mean? Again, you're passing on really good receivers in the 5th round to take Javonte Williams. Now, he could be a league winner at the end of the year. Maybe Melvin Gordon gets hurt. But Melvin Gordon just bought himself 4 more weeks of bell cow work, or not bell cow, but splitting carries with that 70-yard touchdown, and he looked good. You know what I mean? So it's hard because you see the talent with Javonte Williams, you understand it, but you also have to understand that when there's guys like Melvin Gordon hanging around, they just don't go away.
What you needed for Javonte Williams was for Melvin Gordon to be released or traded.
Correct.
And end up on the Dolphins or the Falcons. And then when that didn't happen, he was going to play. So sometimes that works out. Jacksonville last year, Fournette does get cut and your James Robinson explodes. But usually not. So Denver at Jacksonville this week, by the way. Denver at 1-0, a touchdown favorite on the road in week 2. Wow. Well, even next week it'll still be early.
That's
all right. Final thoughts? Are we good?
We're good. I got to get back to waivers.
Get back to waivers. FFPC is all tomorrow night, right?
Yes. Tomorrow
okay, good.
Night. Tomorrow night.
Good. Yeah, I'm in the deep end now, so I need to make sure of these things. Vegas was an amazing time. Thanks to everybody who we met out there. I had some people, I'm sure you did too, who came up to us at different times that watched the show, and that felt really good. And this will be a fun year. Every year is fun. This will be especially fun for me because I feel like this year in these conversations, I'm involved. I'm vested.
Yeah, I love that.
Last year the show was differently branded. We did the Draft Sharks Invitational last year. We're not as focused on these kind of topics, waiver strategy. We want to be sort of a mix with the high stakes player in mind. Now that we are, including now that I'm new to it, like we're both among that community. And so without being too specific, what are you thinking here? What happens? Kind of a mix of data, which we'll often pick up from other sources, and then, a read of our own and ideas of our own. So hopefully you like that, and it's a good conversation.
And we will get into, I don't think we need to do a weekly Draft Sharks Invitational update, but we will get into some of that stuff, and we will have some guests on from the Invitational, which will be fun. But I don't think we need to do weekly, but maybe every couple weeks we'll have the Draft Sharks invite leader on there because we want to. I don't even know who's leading. I'll have to go check it out.
I don't either, but that tournament has a lot of high stakes players in it.
Oh yeah,
right. I'm in a couple of main events with Austin Martin.
Yeah,
and he was on the Draft Sharks Invitational show with us, and so he's in this year too. Like Draft Sharks really went after those guys. It's not just analysts. It's also some of the high end players. So that'll probably work itself out. We'll have guys on here from that who can talk about the stuff we got into tonight quite well.
For sure.
Okay, everybody, that's it. Thank you, Adam Krautwurst. I'm Mike Shope. We will see you next week on the Deep End. Good luck.
See you guys.